When my husband died, I hid the $21 million inheritance until history repeated itself. My name is Eleanor, and I'm 72 years old. Lately, I've learned something profound about silence. It can be the loudest answer you ever give. I remember the day so clearly. My son Mark and my daughter-in-law Chloe came into that small back room. You know, the one where I used to keep old tools and gardening things. They were carrying a tray with my dinner, a plate with some food, a glass of water. It was then, seeing them stand there, a cold smile on their faces, that I truly understood. I wasn't the lady of the house anymore. I was just a burden, a fragile, dependent old woman. They thought. They never imagined, not for a second, what I truly owned. They didn't know the secret I carried, the one my late husband Robert had left for me. It was a secret worth $21 million. All of it carefully hidden away in documents they never even bothered to look for. They were too busy, you see, too busy calculating the value of this house, the very house we stood in. They were already planning its sale, planning to put me in a nursing home as soon as they could. It wounded my soul to watch it all unfold. History was repeating itself right here in my own home. I'd seen it happen to other families, that kind of ingratitude, that slow discarding of an older parent. But now, it was knocking at my door, and it was brought by Mark, the son I raised with every ounce of love I had. But they mistook my quiet patience for weakness. My silence, they thought, was ignorance. Their smiles, that cold distance in their eyes, it felt like a constant. Sometimes, out loud, they should react differently, and silence strike fear the back of their minds. One way or another, that cold distance in their eyes. It felt like a constant. Silent humiliation. Every time Chloe would gently suggest I rest, or Mark would avoid my gaze, it was a reminder. They were pushing me further and further into the shadows of my own home. I was becoming invisible to them, a ghost in the halls where I'd lived and loved for decades. I watched them move through the house, discussing their plans in hushed tones, thinking I couldn't hear, thinking I couldn't understand. But I heard every word. I understood every glance. The emotional coldness was a chill that settled deep in my bones. It was a different kind of pain than losing Robert. This was the pain of being lost while still being here. But what they didn't realize, not one bit, was that while they were pushing me into those shadows, I wasn't simply fading away. Oh no, I was merely waiting for the right moment, the right light, to finally reveal the truth. My truth. The truth that was carefully tucked away, the truth that would change everything. The silence they thought was my surrender was actually my strength. But before all this, before the cold smiles and the backroom dinners, my life was simple and full of affection. My name is Eleanor, and for over 40 years, my profession was caring for my family. Robert and I, we built this house together, brick by brick, you know? Right here in this thriving suburban community. He, with his tireless work as an engineer, was always providing. And me, I was the one who made these four walls a home every meal I cooked, every garment I washed, every piece of advice I gave our son, Mark. That was my way of saying I love you. It wasn't a job to me. It was my life. Robert, my late husband, he was always such a provident man. He used to say that the greatest asset wasn't money itself, but true peace of mind. I can still picture him, late at night, in his study. He'd be organizing papers, meticulously, always. He'd look up at me, a gentle smile on his face, and say, "Eleanor, I'm taking care of your future. I want to make sure you'll never have to depend on anyone, not even our Mark." At the time, I just thought he was being sweet. I didn't truly understand the depth of those words. I just thought it was an exaggeration of concern, a loving husband's worry. I never imagined how truly important those words would become, or how soon. My son, Mark, he was always the center of my universe. Watching him grow up, seeing him graduate from college, then marry Chloe. Everything about it was a source of such immense pride for me. When they married, I opened my home to them, this very house, with open arms. I genuinely believed that a family that grows together stays together. That's what I always taught. That's what I always lived by. I wanted us all to be under one roof, sharing life, building memories. I thought it was the most natural thing in the world. Little did I know, back then, that the love I felt for them, the depth of it, the absolute devotion, it wasn't the same love they felt for me. It makes my heart ache to even think about it now. I truly thought love was a shield, an unbreakable protection. But I was about to discover, slowly, painfully, that for some people, love, well, for some, it's merely a convenience. After Robert passed away, that feeling, that sense of a shield around me, it started to crumble. The atmosphere of the house, my home, it slowly began to change. At first, it was subtle, barely noticeable, like a whisper you almost miss. Chloe, my daughter-in-law, she started making small decisions. Things like changing a sofa, moving a painting from one wall to another. She'd say it was to modernize the environment, to bring it up to date. But to me, it felt different. It felt like she was trying to erase things, erase my memories, erase Robert's presence. Each little change was like a tiny chip off a memory, making the house feel less and less like mine. Mark, my son, he became distant too. The easy morning conversations we used to have, even the silent ones, where we just enjoyed each other's company over breakfast, they just stopped. They were replaced by hurried excuses. "I have a meeting, Mom. Can't talk right now. I'm running late." He would avert his gaze when I tried to talk to him, as if looking at me was too much effort. He'd just say that Chloe was taking care of everything and that I didn't need to worry. His voice was flat, almost rehearsed. His complicity with his wife, my daughter-in-law, it felt like a knife, not a sharp, sudden stab, but a slow, dull ache that wounded me daily, cutting away at the bond we once shared. Then came the conversations about money. Oh, they became frequent, but always in whispers, always when they thought I wasn't listening. It was like a game to them, a secret they shared, excluding me. I'd hear snippets, words like high expenses, the cost of house maintenance. They'd sigh dramatically, and then their eyes would drift to me, almost imperceptibly, as if I were the cause of their problems. Me, Eleanor. I, who had lived a life of economy and sacrifice. Every penny saved, every comfort forgone, all to build this very life, this home. I was now seen as a financial burden. It was a bitter pill to swallow, to be considered a weight after giving everything. And it got worse. Gradually, they stopped calling me Mom. Can you believe that? In front of the grandchildren, my precious grandchildren, they started referring to me as your grandmother. Not my grandmother, but your grandmother, as if I belonged to a bygone era, something that no longer fit into their present. It felt like they were actively placing me in a different time, a different dimension, as if I no longer belonged to them, to us. It was a quiet kind of erasure, making me feel like a relic, an old photograph that gathers dust in the corner of a shelf. It wasn't just the words, it was the tone, the casualness of it that stung the most. It made me feel like I was slowly fading right here in the middle of my own life, in my own home. And there was nothing I could do or say to stop it, nothing they would hear anyway. The final humiliation came so silently, without a single shout, without a harsh word even. It was a Saturday night. I remember it like it was yesterday. Mark and Chloe had invited friends over for dinner. The house was buzzing, full of excited chatter and the clinking of glasses. As always, I had spent most of the day in the kitchen, helping to prepare the dishes my son used to love so much. I peeled vegetables, stirred sauces, made sure everything was just right. It was my way of contributing, of being part of the family, even if my role felt diminished. When the first guests started to arrive, Chloe came into the kitchen. She had that bright, social smile plastered on her face. But her eyes held something else, something I couldn't quite decipher. With what felt like feigned sweetness, she put a hand on my arm and said, "Eleanor, why don't you go to your room and rest? You've worked so hard. Let us take care of everything now." She smiled, a little too widely, and gently nudged me towards the hallway. It wasn't a request. Not really. It was an order, disguised in politeness. I nodded, a strange knot forming in my stomach, and retreated to my room. I could hear the laughter and conversation growing louder as more guests arrived, fading slowly as I closed my door. I sat on my bed, listening, feeling completely cut off. Hours passed. The house was full of laughter, full of music, full of voices. My own stomach started to grumble, a quiet protest against the happy noise outside. I realized I hadn't eaten anything all day. I felt hungry, a deep, persistent ache. I got up, smoothed down my dress, and cautiously made my way to the kitchen, hoping to find a quiet moment, perhaps a plate of leftovers. As I approached the kitchen door, I heard Chloe's voice. It was low, hushed, as if she didn't want to be overheard. I paused, just outside the doorway, and through the crack I saw her. She was handing a plate piled with food to Maria, our housekeeper. Maria has been with us for years. She's a kind woman, always respectful. Chloe leaned in conspiratorially and said, "Take this to Eleanor in the back room and tell her not to bother coming out here tonight. It's just easier this way." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. A back room, not my bedroom, not a guest room, but the back room, the storage room. My place was no longer at the table of my own house. I had been relegated to the storage room, like an old piece of furniture, something to be hidden away when guests arrived, a problem to be tucked out of sight. There was no discussion, no argument. Maria, poor woman, she saw me standing there, her eyes full of a deep, silent pity that wounded me more than Chloe's cruel words. She gave me a small, apologetic look, a glance that spoke volumes about her discomfort. Just then, Mark walked by in the hallway, on his way to the living room, a drink in his hand. He saw the plate, saw Maria's troubled expression, saw me standing there, frozen. He merely lowered his head, not meeting my eyes, a shadow passing over his face. He didn't stop. He just continued walking, straight into the party, leaving me standing there, a silent witness to my own dismissal. His contempt, his utter lack of courage to even acknowledge me, it hurt more than Chloe's direct order. At that moment, standing there in the hallway of the home I had built, the home I had loved, I realized something truly devastating. I was no longer the mother. I was no longer the mother-in-law. I was no longer the grandmother. To them, I was just a problem to be hidden, a secret, a shame. That night, alone in the cold, damp back room, eating a plate of food brought to me by the housekeeper, I understood. The love I felt for them, the boundless, unwavering love I had given for a lifetime, had become a one-way street. It traveled only from my heart to theirs, never to return. And in that quiet, suffocating realization, something inside me broke. And in that quiet, suffocating realization, something inside me broke. But not in the way they expected. No. Instead of crying, instead of confronting them with my hurt, I simply ate. Each mouthful of the food Maria brought me, there in that cold back room, was a reminder that I needed to be strong. Not for revenge. No, that wasn't it at all. I needed to be strong for myself, for the woman Robert loved, the woman who had built this life, this home. I couldn't just crumble. I wouldn't. That very night, long after the last of their guests had left, after the house had fallen silent, and I knew everyone was asleep, I got out of my small bed. The floorboards creaked softly under my bare feet as I made my way through the dark house. My heart pounded a little, not from fear, but from a quiet determination. I went to Robert's old study. It was a room they rarely entered, full of his books and papers, gathering dust. A small sanctuary he had made his own. I knew exactly where to go. Robert, in his methodical way, had a secret drawer in his big oak desk, a small, almost invisible panel that only he, and now I, knew how to open. My fingers traced the wood, found the hidden latch, and with a soft click, It opened. Inside, just as he had promised, was a worn leather folder. He had always told me, "Eleanor, open this only if the world turns upside down." Well, the world had turned upside down. It had been flipped on its head and was now spinning out of control right here in my own home. My hands trembled a little as I pulled the folder out. It felt heavy, not just with papers, but with the weight of everything Robert had planned, everything he had tried to protect me from. I carried it back to my small room, the one they had relegated me to, and sat on the edge of the bed under the dim glow of my small lamp. I opened it. Everything was there, just as he said it would be. Deeds, overseas investment statements, insurance policies. And then there it was. Most importantly, a deed of gift. My breath hitched in my throat as I read the date. The house, this very house, the stage of my humiliation, the place where I was being treated as a burden, had been legally mine for 5 years. Robert had transferred everything into my name, quietly, efficiently, creating a financial fortress around me that no one, especially Mark and Chloe, knew anything about. He had truly taken care of my future. Every single word he'd ever said about ensuring I'd never depend on anyone. It was all laid out in these papers. It wasn't an exaggeration of concern at all. It was wisdom. Pure, unadulterated, loving wisdom. He had seen this coming, or at least he had prepared for the possibility. For a moment, a wave of profound gratitude washed over me, mingled with a fresh pang of grief for him. My Robert, always thinking ahead, always protecting me. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't do anything drastic. With a calm I didn't know I possessed, I carefully put all the papers back into the folder. I closed it, slid it back into the secret drawer in Robert's study, and then returned to my small back room. I lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, my mind racing, but my heart strangely still. From that night on, I began to observe them, really observe them. Every single move, every disingenuous conversation. I noticed how Chloe would leave brochures for retirement communities on the kitchen counter, accidentally open to pages showing smiling seniors playing bingo. I heard their hushed whispers drifting from the living room, always about money, always about high expenses and the market. I overheard them planning my future without me, discussing how they would put me in a charming retirement community, a place they called charming, but that felt like a prison to me. And they talked about how they would divide the money from the sale of the property, my property, their voices low and excited, never imagining that the property wasn't theirs to sell. They were so open in their greed, so confident in their perceived power over me that they barely bothered to hide their intentions. They talked as if I were already gone, a ghost in my own home. They pushed me aside, isolated me, treated me as if my opinions. But what they saw as my weakness, my silence, my quiet compliance, that was, in truth, my strategic patience. I wasn't fading away. I was merely waiting. Waiting for the exact perfect moment. The right light. The moment when the truth, Robert's truth and now my truth, would finally be revealed. And it wouldn't be a whisper. It would be a roar. The days that followed that night in the back room, the days after I found Robert's folder, they were even worse. The mask of politeness, The feigned sweetness Chloe sometimes wore, it completely disappeared. She stopped pretending. Now she simply gave me direct orders. Eleanor, don't forget to water the plants. Her voice wasn't harsh, but it was flat, devoid of any warmth, like she was talking to a hired hand. Eleanor, the dogs made a mess in the yard again. You should probably clean that up. She wouldn't ask. She would just state it, looking at me with an expectation that bordered on demand. I did everything she asked. Every chore. Every task. I watered the plants until my back ached. I cleaned up the dog mess, scrubbing the patio until my knees hurt. I cooked, I cleaned, I kept my mouth shut. My silence, my quiet compliance, it didn't soften them. No, it only made them bolder. And in a strange, slow way, crueler. They saw my quietness as acceptance, my obedience as proof of their control. They believed they had won. They truly believed I had given up. I tried one last time to reach my son, my Mark. It was a Tuesday morning. Chloe had gone out and Mark was alone in the living room, scrolling through his phone. I walked over to him, my heart aching with a desperate kind of hope. I sat down next to him on the sofa, gently placing my hand over his. His fingers were cold. "Son," I began, my voice soft, almost a whisper. "Are you truly happy with what you're becoming?" He pulled his hand back immediately, as if my touch had burned him. An irritated sigh escaped his lips. He finally looked at me, but his eyes were hard, not the loving eyes of my son. "Mom, you're being dramatic again," he said, his voice clipped. "You just don't understand the pressures of modern life. Chloe and I, we have so much on our plates. We're doing our best to take care of everything. You should be more grateful for the roof over your head. For everything we're providing." He stood up, avoiding my gaze once more, and walked away, leaving me sitting there alone. My hand still outstretched, empty. It was like he had slapped me, but without ever raising a hand. Just words, cold, unfeeling words. That was the last straw, I think. Not the orders, not the coldness, but his complete dismissal of my feelings, his absolute lack of understanding. He saw me as a burden, not a mother. He saw the house as theirs to provide, not mine to own. A few days later, they scheduled a visit with a real estate agent. It wasn't a secret. They announced it at breakfast, as if it were a perfectly normal, everyday event. "The agent will be here at 3 this afternoon, Eleanor," Chloe said, stirring her coffee. "Just thought you should know." There was a subtle smirk on her face, a hint of triumph in her eyes. At 3 o'clock sharp, a woman in a smart business suit arrived. She introduced herself as Mrs. Davies, the real estate agent. She was polite, professional. Mark and Chloe, they walked her through the house, pointing out every detail. "Here's the spacious living area," Mark would say, gesturing grandly. "And this beautiful renovated kitchen," Chloe would add, highlighting the very changes she had made to erase my memories. They went from room to room, discussing square footage, property values, school districts. They talked about its strong points, as if the house were just a commodity, a number on a ledger. I was there, in the living room, then the dining room, then the kitchen. I was present, but they acted as if I were invisible. They moved around me, talked over me. spoke of my home as if I were just a piece of furniture, easily moved or disposed of. They openly discussed the potential sale price, right there in front of me. "We're hoping for at least 3 million, possibly more," Mark murmured to the agent, a greedy glint in his eye. "It's a hot market right now," Chloe chimed in, practically rubbing her hands together. The real estate agent, Mrs. Davies, she kept glancing at me. I could feel her eyes, full of a quiet compassion, a silent apology for the situation she was witnessing. She'd offer me a small, sympathetic smile whenever Mark and Chloe weren't looking. She was the only one in that room who saw me, truly saw me, as a person. The only one who seemed to understand the indignity of it all. For Mark and Chloe, I was just there, an old woman slowly fading away, waiting to be moved. A final obstacle, a last hurdle to clear before they could lay claim to what they believed was rightfully theirs. The money, the millions they thought they would get from selling my house. They no longer bothered to hide their intentions. Their smiles were gone, replaced by an open, unvarnished greed. They were so close, they thought, so very close to achieving their dream, my home, my life. I just sat there, listening to them discuss my future, their future, all intertwined with the sale of this house. My house. Their words hung heavy in the air, a thick blanket of arrogance and expectation. They were so confident, so sure of their victory. They had no idea what was coming, none at all. And the silence I offered them, the quiet gaze I held, wasn't acceptance. It was the calm before the storm. The very last moment, before everything they thought they knew, everything they had so carefully planned, would come crashing down. 2 weeks felt like an eternity, and also no time at all. Then, the day came. They called me for a family meeting in the living room. It sounded so formal, so important, but I knew exactly what it was. A final step in their plan. On the polished coffee table, right there in the middle, sat a colorful brochure, a nursing home. Its pages showed smiling, gray-haired people playing bingo and doing yoga, all under bright artificial lights. Chloe, ever the speaker for their little duo, began. Her voice was saccharine, sickly sweet, as she talked about the advantages of the place, how I would have activities tailored just for me, how I would make friends my age. She painted a picture of a vibrant new life, a life away from them, a life that sounded like a prison wrapped in a pretty bow. Mark, my son, sat beside her. He just nodded along, his eyes glued to the pattern on the rug, unable to meet my gaze. He never said a word. He just confirmed her cruel performance with his silence. A silent betrayal that cut deeper than any words could. When they finished their pathetic little presentation, a silence descended upon the room. I let it stretch out for a moment. Just silence, letting them think I was processing, accepting, perhaps even agreeing. Then, with the utmost calm, a calm I truly felt deep inside, I reached into my purse. My fingers found the folded copy of the house deed, the legal paper Robert had so carefully secured for me years ago. I pulled it out, unfolded it slowly, and then, ever so gently, placed it right on top of their glossy nursing home brochure. My hand didn't tremble. My voice, when I spoke, was firm, steady, but without a trace of anger, just pure, quiet certainty. "I think," I said, looking from Chloe to Mark, "it will be rather difficult for you to sell a property that doesn't belong to you." The shock on their faces was immediate, a powerful, unspoken answer. Chloe picked up the paper, her fingers fumbling, her eyes scanning the lines, moving back and forth, completely incredulous. Her mouth opened and closed a few times, but no sound came out. Mark, my son, went pale. So pale his face turned ash gray. He started to stammer, a string of incoherent sounds, completely lost for words, his carefully constructed world crumbling right before his eyes. He tried to speak, but only air escaped his lips. I continued, my voice still even, still calm, laying out the truth they had so desperately tried to bury. "This house," I explained, gesturing around the very living room where they had planned my exile, "is legally mine. It has been for 5 years, a gift from Robert." Their eyes widened, their expressions a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. "And not just this house," I went on, "but also the investments, all of them. Robert, in his incredible wisdom, placed everything into a fund in my name, $21 million, to be precise." I paused, letting the numbers sink in, letting the weight of the truth press down on them. "So, the roof you so graciously offered me," I concluded, my gaze meeting Mark's, a gaze he finally couldn't avoid, in fact, was always mine. There were no shouts from me, no dramatic accusations, no tears, just the truth, exposed in a contained and definitive way, a truth that ripped through their carefully woven lies and delusions of grandeur. It was like watching a castle of greed, a fortress they had built on my silence and their own assumptions, crumble into dust right before my eyes. All their whispered plans, their condescending smiles, their hurried excuses, their calculating glances, all of it collapsed in that single, shattering moment. They were speechless, not with remorse, I knew, but with disbelief and the sudden, terrifying realization that their game was over. The power had shifted, silently, completely, and irrevocably. And in their stunned, defeated silence, I finally, truly felt free. After the reveal, the silence in that living room was thick, suffocating. They just stared at me, their faces a mixture of disbelief and something akin to terror. I could see their minds racing, trying to process what I'd just said, what Robert had done, what I had done. I didn't yell. I didn't need to. The truth was enough. I didn't evict them immediately. No, that wasn't my way. I simply told them, calmly, that they had a month to find another place to live. That's all. Just 1 month. Mark, my son, he tried to apologize then. He started talking about a misunderstanding, about how they'd been under pressure, about how he didn't know. His words were hollow, though. They rang empty in the quiet house. What was broken between us? What had shattered so completely over the past few years? Wasn't something an apology, however mumbled or belated, could ever fix. Trust, once lost like that, once trampled underfoot, it doesn't easily return. It leaves a scar that runs too deep. I just listened, nodded slowly, and watched his eyes dart around, never truly meeting mine. I knew he was just trying to save face, trying to find a way out, but there was no way out of the truth. The next few weeks were strange. A thick tension hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. Chloe packed silently, her face a mask. Mark avoided me entirely, leaving for work early and coming home late. When the month was up, they left. Just like that. A U-Haul truck in the driveway, a few terse goodbyes, and then silence. In the first few months after they were gone, the house felt empty, too large. The rooms echoed with a quiet I hadn't heard in years, a quiet that at first felt lonely. It was strange, living alone again in the home I'd shared with Robert and then with Mark and Chloe. But gradually, slowly, I started to fill the space not with people, but with my own presence again. I went back to doing the things I loved, the things I'd put aside for so long. I went back to cooking my old recipes, the ones Robert used to adore. The smell of fresh-baked bread, of simmering tomato sauce, filled the kitchen once more. I spent hours tending to my garden, pulling weeds, nurturing the roses Robert had planted years ago. I listened to my music, classical tunes that soothed my soul, letting the melodies drift through the quiet rooms. The house began to breathe again, and so did I. One of the first things I did, after all the dust settled, was to create an education fund for my grandchildren. My precious grandchildren. They were not to blame for their parents' choices, not for any of it. They deserved a secure future, a chance at a good life, free from the kind of greed I had just witnessed. It was important to me to ensure they had a foundation, something solid to stand on, something their parents might not provide. Months passed, each one bringing a little more peace, a little more clarity. I walked through the rooms of that big house. The house Robert and I had built, and I realized something profound. It held too many memories now, not just good ones, but too much pain, too much sorrow from the last few years. It felt heavy with ghosts, not just Robert's loving spirit, but the ghosts of betrayal and hurt. I decided that house, despite its history, held more pain than joy for me now. It was time for a fresh start, a completely new chapter. So I sold the property. It was a big decision, but it felt right, like shedding an old skin. With the money, I bought myself a comfortable apartment. Not a huge place, just right for me, with a beautiful ocean view. Every morning, I wake up to the sound of waves, the salty air drifting in through my balcony doors. It's a completely different rhythm of life now. Today, my routine is simple, unhurried. I take long walks on the beach, feeling the sand between my toes, listening to the seagulls cry. I joined a yoga class, something I never thought I'd do, and I find such a quiet strength in those slow, deliberate movements. And the best part? The affection of my grandchildren. They come to visit on weekends, full of laughter and innocent questions. We bake cookies, we tell stories, we build sandcastles. They are the part of my family I chose to keep close, the connection that still feels pure and untainted. I didn't leave that situation, that life, to prove anything to anyone. Not to Mark, not to Chloe, not to anyone else. I did it to reclaim something far more important: the right to live my last years in peace, with dignity, and with a clean soul. I found that peace here, by the sea, and it's a feeling no amount of money, no grand house could ever buy. I found that peace here, by the sea, and it's a feeling no amount of money, no grand house could ever buy. Today, looking at the ocean from my balcony, with the sun warm on my skin and the gentle roar of the waves filling the air, I think about how curious life truly is. It throws things at you, doesn't it? Things you never expect. Things that test every fiber of your being. Sometimes the greatest strength we possess isn't in how loud we can be or how quickly we react. Sometimes the greatest strength is hidden in our ability to wait, to observe, to truly see what's happening around us, even when others think we're not paying attention. And, perhaps most importantly, to remain true to who we are, to hold on to our dignity, our self-worth, even when others try to diminish us, to make us feel small, or worse, invisible. I'm not a heroine, not in any grand sense of the word. I didn't fight a war or discover a cure for anything. I'm just Eleanor, a woman, an old woman, yes, but a woman who simply refused to be erased from her own story. My story, the one I lived, the one I built, brick by brick, moment by moment. I refused to let it be rewritten by others, by their greed, by their casual unkindness. I refused to fade into the background, to become a quiet shadow in the corner of a room, simply because I had aged. It breaks my heart to know that my story, the one I lived through, unfortunately, isn't unique. It repeats itself in so many homes, in so many different ways, every single day. I see it in the news, I hear snippets of it from friends. Sometimes I just feel it in the air, the way some older people are treated, as if their worth diminishes with their years, as if their voices no longer matter, as if their life experiences, their wisdom, everything they've accumulated over decades, can simply be dismissed, set aside, or even ignored. It's a silent epidemic, this treatment, this slow forgetting of those who came before us, those who built the very foundations we stand on. I learned so much through that pain, that deep, cutting injustice. I learned that even when you feel the most alone, when the people who should love you most turn their backs, you still have yourself. You still have your own inner strength, and that's a power no one can take away. My new beginning, here by the sea, it taught me that peace isn't something you wait for others to give you. It's something you claim for yourself. It's about standing tall, even when your knees might tremble, and saying, "No, my life, my dignity, my peace, these are mine to protect." It's a simple truth, really. Every human being has value, no matter their age, no matter their circumstances. We deserve respect. We deserve dignity. We deserve to be seen, to be heard, to be acknowledged, and to live our lives with the grace we've earned, especially when we are at a point in life where we might seem vulnerable, where others might think we are easily manipulated or controlled. That's precisely when our quiet strength, our inner knowing, becomes our greatest shield. And you? Have you ever been treated as if you were invisible by those who should protect you most? Have you ever felt that quiet sting of being overlooked, of being dismissed, of having your worth diminished simply because of who you are or because of your age? It's a feeling that stays with you, isn't it? It leaves a mark, a reminder that we must always, always stand up for ourselves, even when it's hard, even when it means standing alone. It's a feeling that stays with you, isn't it? It leaves a mark, a quiet reminder that we must always, always stand up for ourselves, even when it's hard, even when it means standing alone. Because if we don't, who will? Life, this long, winding journey I've been on for 72 years, it taught me something so profound, so deeply true. True value isn't really in what we have in the bank, or the size of our house, or the fancy things we might own. All those material possessions, they can be taken, sold, or just lose their shine over time. No, the real, lasting value, the kind that truly matters, is in the self-respect we hold within us. That quiet, unwavering sense of who we are, what we stand for, what we deserve. That inner dignity. And that respect? That, my dear friend, no one can ever take from us. Not Mark, not Chloe, not any unkind word or dismissive glance. It's ours to cherish and to protect, like a precious, unbreakable jewel in our hearts. I had to learn that the hard way, I suppose, to truly take care of myself, to listen to that quiet inner voice that said, "Eleanor, you deserve better." To be my own guardian, my own protector, my own advocate, when the people who should have been those things abandoned me. And in doing so, in choosing myself, I found something so precious, so utterly priceless, a peace that no amount of money could ever buy. It's a deep, quiet calm that settles in your heart when you know you've finally done right by yourself. When you've reclaimed your dignity, your rightful place, when you've chosen peace over conflict and self-worth over silent suffering, that's the real treasure, you see. More than any millions Robert left me, the money simply gave me the freedom to pursue that peace. But the peace itself, I had to earn, had to find within my own soul. I sit here now, on my balcony, the ocean stretching out before me, vast and calm, just like my spirit has become. The sun is warm on my skin, and the gentle roar of the waves fills the air, a constant, comforting rhythm. Every day, I watch the horizon, full of hope and new possibilities. My simple routine, these walks on the beach, my yoga, the laughter of my grandchildren. It's a life I crafted for myself, a life of profound serenity. I don't look back with bitterness anymore. I look forward with gratitude. Gratitude for Robert's foresight, yes, but mostly gratitude for my own resilience, for the strength I found when I thought I had none left. And I think about all of you listening to my story. Perhaps you faced your own kind of invisibility, your own quiet battles, your own challenges. Perhaps you felt that cold sting of being overlooked or dismissed by those who should have cherished you most. If my story resonates with you, if it touches a chord, and if you want to keep hearing these real, honest stories, stories from the heart, stories about finding strength and reclaiming dignity, then there's just one little thing. You know how sometimes in this busy online world, things just quietly disappear. Like a subscription you thought you had, a connection you valued. Well, YouTube can be a bit like that. Sometimes it might just unsubscribe you without warning, without a word. So, if you wouldn't mind, just take a moment, a tiny moment to confirm if you're still subscribed to the channel. And if you are, if that little button is still gray, just give that tiny bell a tap. That way, you won't miss any of the stories we share here. It's just a gentle way of making sure we stay connected, you and I. A way of making sure our voices, our shared experiences, our stories are never silenced or forgotten. Because in this vast, sometimes overwhelming world, we all need to be seen, to be heard. We all deserve to feel that connection. And together, we can make sure no one, absolutely no one, feels invisible.